Hey, good morning, people. Welcome to another Bible study. Today, we're looking at Matthew chapter 7, the end of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus wraps up his sermon in this chapter with a few things. He first tells his people to not judge others, that by the measure that they judge, they will be judged. He opens up with that, but he closes off saying that there's two ways to live. There's two gates to go through, if you will. There's a wide gate that many will go through, and there's a narrow gate that only few will go through. The narrow gate is the entrance to the kingdom of heaven, and it's a narrow gate, so it's a narrow path. Jesus has given us instructions in this sermon on how to live in the straight and narrow. First and foremost, by being righteous, and doing right by God or by others isn't just obeying the commandments, going to church, reading the Bible. No, righteousness is a lot deeper than that. Righteousness has to do with our inward character traits. Like in the beginning, in chapter 5, when Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek of heart. Blessed are those who mourn." He already told us that we can't fulfill the law, that in order to be perfect, we need him. And through him, we are forgiven. And through him, we can change our hearts, our inner person, to be more Christ-like. And when we do that, we are the light of the world, like Jesus said. But it's not just inward character traits, because you can have a heart that's pure, and you can be kind to others, but you could still be doing those things not for God, but for yourself. In chapter 6, when Jesus tells us, be righteous, but don't let other people see your righteousness. Do things between you and God, as that's where your real reward is. So we have these instructions, and now he's telling us to not judge others. And it's a little confusing because towards the end, he tells us that we must judge others by the fruit. He tells us to beware of false prophets. He tells us that when the time comes, people will say, Jesus, we knew you. Why? Or we cast demons out in your name. We healed many in your name. And Jesus says that he will respond to them saying, truly, I did not know you. Reason being is because they were not truly doing things for Jesus, for God's glory. They were probably doing things, well, for their own flesh, for their own admiration, acknowledgement, respect. So we have this situation where Jesus is telling us to not judge, but really what he's saying is don't be a hypocrite. I know in the last video I started off with saying that Jesus tells us not to be hypocrites, and I have to correct that. It's actually in this chapter where he tells us, do not be hypocrites. Do not tell your brother about the speck in his eye when you yourself have a log in your own eye. That, in other words, he's saying don't go around worrying about other people's sin when you yourself haven't even come to terms with your own sin. You're not even aware of your own sin. it's important, because if we are pure of heart and we are kind to others and we do all these things that are Christ-like, well, even if we do those things, it's not enough, because what really matters, going back to chapter 6, is if our actions are storing up treasures in heaven. So by Jesus telling us to take care of the speck in our own eye to take care of the plank in our eye before we take the speck out of our brother's eye, he's inviting us to look inward and see whether or not our actions are bearing fruit of righteousness or not. Because remember, at the end of the chapter, he warns us about false prophets, and he tells us that you will know a false prophet by the fruit that they bear. And it makes sense. Like, you can be pure of heart, you can say you do this, you can say you do that, but really, actions speak louder than words. And the outcomes or results of these actions and words are pretty evident if they're based on something good or something bad. Jesus says a good tree will bear good fruit, whereas a bad tree will not bear any good fruit, but will bear bad fruit. It's pretty simple. And with this discernment, he allows us to not judge others necessarily, but to be weary of others who can try to take us down the wider path that I was speaking of in the beginning of this video. So it's all about lining up your actions with your heart and lining up your heart with God's will. When you do that and you act accordingly, you are walking in the straight and narrow. And let me be blunt, you're not gonna make it far without stepping to the side or maybe veering off to the wider one. It's just not gonna happen. We are imperfect. We are sinful. We can't do it on our own. So this is the time where I would like to invite you guys to ask Jesus to come into your life if he's not there already. And if he is, ask, because in this chapter, Jesus also tells us that we who ask shall receive, and we who seek shall find. So ask for discernment. Ask to be able to judge your situation in a way that you may see the sin within you, repent, and make a change. It's never too late to go back on the straight and narrow path. It's never too late. So I invite you guys to ask yourself, what path am I on? Am I on the path of fleshly desires? Am I on the path of righteousness? Am I on the harder path, or am I on a comfortable path? All these are questions you can ask yourself. And don't be afraid to make a change. Ask for strength, ask for guidance, and he will give it to you. I think I said quite enough. Love you guys. Peace.